every now and then you just got to have a philosophical heavyweight come in and do some real work. That's what we got here today.
Right. And so they're fighting not only
There was a Trinity Radio episode.
Because you guys preach stuff that is like literally unrecognizable to an ancient African.
I mean, they do, man. It's urban apologetics. You know what I'm saying? Showing black dignity with the gospel.
What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman. Y'all know what it is, man. Tru-ID Apologetics. And we back one more again, man. We got a special guest in the building. It's been a long time coming. A guy that I've been really excited to interview. My man, Sean Mayhem Mixon. That's what I'm gonna call you, bro. Mayhem Mixon. What's going on with you, bro?
I love it, Doc. I love it.
Yeah, man.
Good to be here.
You out here in these philosophical streets, bro. You're not playing around, man. You're not playing around.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's an honor.
Now I have to say, man, I wish I had known what the dress code was going to be. I would have put on my sport coat as well. I feel underdressed. You out here looking snappy with it, But maybe I'll airbrush it in or edit it in, in the editing phase. But man, how you doing, man? How's it going there, brother?
It's doing. I'm doing great. And just let me say to you, thanks for this opportunity to interview with you today. I'm so happy to be on Tru-ID. Apologetics, exposing communities of color to ideas that are not readily available. And I think it's such an important work. It's so few of us who are out here doing this.
Right.
So I think anyone who is doing the work that you're doing with apologetics and being a communicator to our community, it needs to be applauded and needs to be supported and encouraged and needs to be joined. Like, we need more of us out here doing this.
Man, that is a fact, man. I mean, first of all, I definitely appreciate that, bro. I really do. You're right. It's definitely a few of us out here. You know what I'm saying? But I think, what it is that we have a deep intellectual tradition, in the African-American community. Great thinkers, that are just part of our history. And, I think that in our generation, it's on guys like us to keep those embers burning, particularly in a way that honors Christ, man. And so that's what I'm trying to do, bring that voice. And, you're in certainly, deeper waters than I am, with that, being in academia. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experiences? I understand you just recently, got your professorship, if you will, which is extremely exciting, but yeah, definitely tell us a little bit about that, bro.
Well, I'm just thankful to God, first of all, for this, for his favor, for his grace. I recently became a professor of philosophy at Dallas College. It's always been my dream to teach college. And so after 10 years of teaching in public school, I taught high school students and middle school students, and from 7th all the way up to 12th grade, or 11th grade, specifically from 7th to 11th grade. I recently became a professor of philosophy with Dallas College, and it's a tremendous honor to work with such an amazing organization. My mom actually took us to the college that I'm teaching at when I was like 5 and 6 in the 90s. As a matter of fact, on my transcript, I have continuing education credits from what's called Kitty College, because when she would take us to the college, she would place us in daycare. The college had daycare, and they gave the kids daycare credits. So I'm probably the only professor at Dallas College who has Kitty College continuing education credits on their transcript. Yeah, and I also was
Kitty credits paid off.
Yeah, hey, it paid off. It was fun. I remember watching movies and eating pizza, and but I actually was a student at Dallas College as well. I graduated from Cedar Valley College, and I was Mr. Cedar Valley. I worked all around the college, and so when they hired me, it was always my goal to get my education and to go back and teach there. And to be paid to teach philosophy is I have not been the same uh, since I started this semester. It's like really like, are y'all really paying me to do this? But keep paying me to do this, Dallas College. I appreciate it.
Right,
But
right. Yeah, please keep paying the brother. Please keep paying him. Yeah, right.
I don't want to
That's
stop
hilarious.
the money from flowing. But
Yeah.
I enjoy the opportunity.
Man,
Yeah,
that's
so it's
fantastic,
great.
man. No, that's awesome to hear, man. And just from the outside looking in, I remember, when you posted it on Facebook, and you really could see just the joy on your face. You know what I mean? Just
Wow.
beaming through the screen on your Facebook feed, and I could tell that it was just really a huge. And now, obviously, I didn't know all of this, backstory.
Mhm.
Um, but I do have to ask this. I find this interesting. Like, what is it? Um, being a teacher, what is that that drive for you? Like, what is it what is it about being a teacher that just kind of strikes your passions the way that it does?
Well, that's a great question. I think I would say 2 points on that. From a spiritual perspective, I've come to realize, here are 3 points on that. So first, I always had a sense when I was a kid. As a matter of fact, I often tell people that when I was like 5 or 6, I had a thought to pop in my head, and I've always said that that thought was God speaking to me, and it said, "You're going to do something great for me." And my understanding at that time was that, this is God talking to me. But I spent my childhood up until my early adulthood trying to figure out what was the great thing that the God had called me to do for Him. And so I used to want to change the world, and within the context of that calling was I had just watched Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech for the first time in my life, and I remember as a 5-year-old thinking, "Wow, this is amazing. I want to do something on that level."
Yeah.
And then I was walking, then the thought hit me, and it's like, you're gonna do something great for me. And I have not had a privileged life. I've had some many struggles and challenges, but in my darkest moments, this word, this speech, this thought, this idea has carried me through and kept me pressing forward, kept me uh, looking at my suffering as being redemptive and having purpose to it. Ironically, about a year or two back, I just happened to be reading the Gospels, and it says, and just Jesus was speaking, and Jesus says that whosoever should do what I teach and teach others to do it, the same will be called great. And instantly I had an insight, what many would in our community would call a revelation that I've been a teacher for the past 10 years. I was drawn to teaching. There are several scriptures in my mind that have really meant a lot to me, and one was, "Out of all thine get an understanding," what Solomon said, and I remember being a kid and thinking, "Whatever you get and understand. Make sure you understand things." So I began to, and I was always a curious kid, but at that point, I began to say, "I'm not just going to ask questions anymore. Now I'll find answers to my questions." And so I began a practice of whenever a question would pop in my mind doing research. So I'm 16 and I'm reading Carl Jung's psychological types, which is the basis
Oh,
of the
snap.
Myers-Briggs type indicator. Had no clue what I was reading. I was always printing out Wikipedia articles, learning about different topics, and going to the library. It was informational text after informational text. That drew me. And I also and so it's that desire to understand which influences me to be a teacher. I also want to add that I think a teacher is one of the gifts of to the body of Christ that Paul mentions.
Oh yeah, sure,
Teaching
of
is one of
course.
those ministries. And so and it's the thirdly, I would say it's the fact that I didn't understand a lot of things when I was younger and I didn't have anyone to explain them to me. So it's a sort of remembering who I was as a kid. And when I look at other people, I treat them the way I want to be treated. And so I have a commitment
Right.
in not just getting students to pass certain courses and getting them to get great grades. I want them to understand. You know, I'm the type of person I will stop. Do you understand? If you don't, let me know, because we're not moving on. Like, my goal is for you to understand. And so I think that's what makes me a teacher. It's like, it's the essence of me. Like, I'm not satisfied with me just talking and no one has, grown or became developed skills or acquired any new knowledge. I want you to understand and be empowered through transferable skills. And that's what I do in my class through teaching logic uh, as a hybrid within my philosophy courses.
Man, that's phenomenal, man. That's such a rich, just so much depth there that I would love to dig into, because I'm hearing you. Of course, you're teaching logic, you're teaching philosophy, and I feel like so often people miss what you just said. Like, you're not just teaching concepts, but there really is a kingdom call. There's a connection, of fluidity, of the content that you're teaching and the calling of God, right? They're not two separate realms, to be delved into. Take us into that a little bit. Like, when you look at your role, and you've already touched on this somewhat, but being that professor standing in that classroom, you are indeed, a kingdom representative. What does it look like to live out that kingdom call in that capacity as a professor? What does that look like for you?
Absolutely. Uh, so in my classes, I usually teach students how to create arguments using four common argument forms: modus ponens, modus tollens, disjunctive syllogism, hypothetical syllogism. These are terms that your listeners can go and look up, and they can find the argument forms themselves and begin to practice. But I teach my students also how to analyze arguments. That is, when you read the arguments of others, are you able to construct the arguments that they are giving? It's one thing for you to give your own argument, but can you analyze and reconstruct the arguments of others in terms of premises and conclusion? Premise one, all men are mortal. Premise two, Socrates is a man. Therefore, the conclusion, Socrates is mortal. Can you do that with a 1,000 word essay? Can you do that with a textbook? Can you do that with a any type of article that someone who is trying to present a reasoned defense of their view to the audience, to you, the reader? So I teach my students how to create arguments, how to analyze arguments, and then finally how to evaluate arguments. We want sound arguments if they are in a deductive form, and that means an argument whose premises, whose two statements, two declarative sentences, if they are true, they guarantee that the conclusion is true. So it's two properties of arguments that we want to introduce to students. It is the validity, which is the logic and the reasoning of your argument. And it is the soundness, which has to do with true premises. So when you evaluate arguments, what you're asking is, did they give evidence for their premises? Did they give an argument for their premises? Did they give enough evidence to support their premise? If I'm trying to prove that all cows eat grass, and I just show you that my cow, Betsy, eats grass, that's not enough evidence to prove that all cows eat grass. So the final step in my goal in logic instruction is to teach students how to not just create their own arguments, to analyze the arguments of others, but how to evaluate arguments in terms of, are they sound? Is it enough evidence there to prove the premises, and are they valid? So with that, I have a passion for logic instruction, especially in minority communities, because as I said at the beginning of the interview, I feel like this logic instruction has not always been readily available. I come
Right.
from a family whose They are native to Dallas. They lived in West Dallas. They had some projects, some government housing facilities. My family comes from there. In our community, we would call that the hood, right? So
Right. Right.
my family
I'm from the
is
hood.
from the hood,
Uh-huh.
right? And so there's a lack. The one word that I keep hearing around that I've been hearing for several years, just being an educator, is exposure. People in the African American community, we lack exposure. It's not that we can't do
It's
this stuff.
true.
We just don't hadn't heard about it. Don't
Thank you,
know about it.
bro. I'm so glad you said that, and I'm sorry to butt in, but what you said is so powerful, and I think that, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say this. I don't know who is gonna offend, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Maybe I edit this out later, but there are so many times where I feel like many individuals that I interact with, don't have an appreciation for Christian philosophy, for apologetics, and so on and so forth, because they haven't been exposed to it, and
Mhm,
the context that we're dealing with, the populations that we're dealing with, they haven't been exposed to it either, so they just don't see the value. But
mhm,
it's not that we can't comprehend it. It's just that we
mhm,
haven't had the opportunity. And to your point of what you just said, you know what? If people were to just hone that skill of being able to identify and just map out arguments, I'm telling you, like 90% of the memes and YouTube videos that are
wow.
causing people to be shipwrecked in their faith would be of no impact whatsoever. You have, I don't care if it's some Hebrew Israelite video, or I mean, you know how it is, TikTok or what have you. There are lots and lots of bad arguments that people are finding to be compelling, but it's because they have not been exposed to the
Mhm,
skill set that you're talking about, of being able to break down an argument and see where the fallacies are, and see,
mhm,
well, hey, wait a minute, this conclusion doesn't follow from the premises that this person just presented on this YouTube video, or the evidence that they're bringing to bear to support their claim is meager at best. If people were just able to identify and be able to work through those steps, man, I'm telling you, you probably wouldn't need Tru-ID, to be honest. we people would just, everybody
wow,
would be on that tip. You see what I'm saying?
wow.
But no, I just
Yeah.
wanted to really acknowledge. I didn't want people to miss that. I wanted to acknowledge what you said there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then specifically as a Christian scholar, it's important to ensure that our beliefs are shown to be consistent with rationality, because generally people from a naturalistic, atheistic perspective and viewpoint and worldview, at least the popular ones, the popularizers of atheism, their trope is that religious thinkers and religious thought is irrational. It's the cause of suffering in the world. It is the
Yeah,
cause of,
right.
the world's problems and all the evil in the world. So it's important that we show within the academic community that there are good arguments for the things we believed. Now, this is not to say that if you don't have an argument, that you cannot have belief in religious thought, in particular. Take, for example, the argument for the existence of God. It's not to say that you can't believe in God without arguments. Alvin Plantinga, the eminent philosopher of religion, some call the greatest living philosopher of religion today, if
He's one of
not
them
the
OGs
greatest
now.
living,
Yeah, yes,
right,
sir. Yes,
if
sir.
not the greatest living philosopher. He's shown definitively, I believe, that you don't need arguments to prove the existence of God. Just like I don't need an argument to prove that I ate a bowl of cereal for breakfast. I have memory. Memory is a valid form of warrant. It can support my beliefs. So we have so many beliefs that don't believe on the basis of argument. We just believe intuitively. And so, but that's not to say that there are not good arguments that you can present in defense of God. Some Christians, they make the same mistake. They make the same mistake that many atheists make, in the sense that they assume that faith is something that is at odds or inconsistent with evidence, right? But that is not biblical. the apostles Peter and when he's writing in his epistle, he says, we didn't believe cleverly devised fables that
That's
were
right.
given to us, but we told you about the things that we saw with our eyes. That, and John said, the things that our ears have heard, that our hands have touched. That's empiricism. That's the census.
Come on, bro.
This is showing that these apostles were making empirically observable claims that Jesus rose and that they saw him. It's not like they made an inference that he rose, that it was argument to the best explanation. No, they were like, no, we saw Jesus.
We saw it
after he was crucified. So Christianity is in its essence, it is empirical, it is scientifically testable in the original claims of the first Christians. But so we can still give reasons why we believe. And the reason that's important is because scholars, what they do is that they demonstrate the truth of particular theories through argument and evidence. So if I'm a Christian scholar, I have to use the same tools. Just like if I'm a mechanic, I have to fix cars. It's like, if I'm a Christian mechanic, it's not that I stop fixing cars. No,
right.
I'm a Christian who fixes cars. So this is the essence of scholarship. So what scholars do, they communicate with each other within an academic context. And in the community of scholars, academicians have a variety of distinct starting places. They're not all Christians. Some of them are atheists. Some of them are Hindus. Some of them are from a plethora of different religions.
Right.
So we Christians, we have fundamental views about reality, and from these fundamental views, we build our worldview. And if our conclusions are to be persuasive to unbelievers, we must be willing to explain the warrant for our fundamental commitments. And in this way, the academician provides a defense of faith, because it's the audience of who we're communicating with. I don't have to convince a Christian that Jesus rose from the dead. If he's a Christian in the sense that I'm a Christian, right? We already agree with that. Now we may differ on how our church services are supposed to be conducted. We may defer on whether we should baptize in Jesus's name or in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But what those beliefs that unite us do not need to be argued for. But as a Christian scholar, what you need to do is argue for those fundamental beliefs, because a lot of people have views and worldviews that are fundamentally opposed to Christian belief.
That's right. That's fantastic. And so, gosh, man, there's so many different directions I want to go here. But first of all, I love what you did there by just emphasizing the access that as Christians that we have to an evidential basis for the faith, right? But then also, we can take the Alvin Plantinga route as well, kind of like the warranted Christian belief route. Also, I'm thinking about doing a whole show on that. Actually, matter of fact, I might just invite you to, back to talk about that, because I think that, and I promise I won't go too far afield here, but when it comes to the African American context, there is this belief that African enslaved persons were duped into, Christianity, and that those initial enslaved African believers perhaps didn't have warrant, but were fooled into, Christianity, through some deceit by the slave master and so on. However, I think that if you look at Alvin Plantinga's approach, and there's many different ways to go about it, I do believe that a case can be made that those African enslaved persons had the kind of warranted Christian belief that was not based on evidence, but was properly basic, right? Such that their basis for affirming Christianity was on par with anybody else's, right? So, for example, you have, I think it was W.L. Boss said that who was an enslaved person, said that they were not allowed to have any prayer meetings or services and so on and so forth. But in his words, he says, quote, "But something on the inside told us about God and that there was a better life hereafter," right? Now that sounds to me like the sensus divinitatis, right?
Mm.
Something on the inside. There was this direct
Wow.
witness of God's existence, and some of what Alvin Plantinga referred to as the cardinal truths of Christianity. And I think that if you look at the I don't know why there's a book called God Struck Me Dead, where people, enslaved persons, formerly enslaved persons, are giving their accounts of their conversions, and it's very experiential. They had a vision, they had a dream, they had an experience, they had something like that, but it's very experiential in ways that I think can be tied to, again, that sensus divinitatis. And so I think that they could have warranted, justified, and warranted beliefs about Christianity specifically, even in the face of slave masters who were presenting a caricature of what Christianity actually was. God could witness to them directly.
Wow.
So there's real, and this goes back to what I was saying before. There's real applications of these things that you're saying to the questions that are swirling about in the African American context, and we just have to avail ourselves of those things. But man, I'm gonna camp out right there. I'm gonna have to bring you back, for a whole.
That is excellent. Whew. And I struggle. Those who know me, they know I struggle with nodding while people talk. While someone is talking. But what you were saying was just like, oh, that was good. That was really good. And I was thinking, I said, the evidence of a transformed life is empirically testable evidence
Yes, sir. Yep.
for the existence of God. I mean, it is the fundamental proof. I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation. And I mean, it's the transformation. I mean, this is how we know Apostle Paul was converted, right? He was killing. He was attempting to killing. If he wasn't throwing the stones, he was organizing,
holding the coats. And,
right. He was finding them and persecuting Christians. But then he goes from hating Christ to saying he's a slave to Christ. And how else do you explain that unless there was some type of transformative experience? But that's not a normal experience. Most people who hate people stay hating people.
It's true.
Right. I mean, if a
hater for life,
right? If a KKK member started an organization for African American, it would be people would be like, what happened? How did you go from that to here? Because our intuitive sense tells us that you can't make that drastic change naturally. That's not a naturally occurring thing. There must have been some experience that explains it. And so I think the evidence of a transformed life is proof positive evidence for the existence of God, and in particular the truth of Christian belief, because it was Christ who was said to have appeared to Paul. He didn't think an angel or God appeared. He said, no. He said, I'm the one you persecute.
Right.
I'm Jesus, the one you persecute.
Paul had to have been shook, bro. You know what I'm saying? If you going about your business, you been persecuting Christ, all of a sudden you standing right there in front of the risen Lord. I mean, he had to have been shook. He had to be. That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah.
But so circling back around to something that you said, just talking about being a Christian in academic circles, because I think that there's this misperception, among some, especially with the internet atheist crowd, that somehow Christians are on the outs, when it comes to these academic circles. Like when they see somebody like a William Lane Craig or a Richard Swinburne, it's like, oh, well, they're just kind of like these outliers. But I don't think that they realize, like, no, like amongst academics, like you said, everybody's starting from various different vantage points and wrestling with some questions that are central to the human experience and our understanding of the world. Can you give us kind of from your perspective, and I would say that you are an insider when it comes to academia, when you look at the landscape in terms of where Christians find themselves in academia, what are you seeing right now? How and what ways are we able to, we meaning Christians, contributing to important conversations around philosophy and so forth?
Well, So what I see is that Christians are contributing, but it may not look like one would expect it to look. And this is because if if I'm to glorify God, I have to let my light shine. And my light is reflected in from what wherever I am, right? So if I'm a mechanic, then my light is my work. Am I an honest mechanic, or do I break things and try to charge people more to fix them? I had a guy who did that once. I just needed an oil change. He said,
Oh,
"Hey, let me
snap.
show you something. We can't we can't get your the cap off of this, and we're gonna, it's gonna cost $150 to take this cap." I said, "Oh, you know what?" I said, "Well, thank you, no problem. I'll just go somewhere." Then I left, and then they took it off and changed the oil. I was like, "Oh, so you a crook?"
Uh-oh.
So
Yeah.
how does your character and your work, right? So the Bible speaks of both. Ecclesiastes speaks of whatever your hands finds to do with all your might. So and it's not just our ethic that shows Christ. It is our work and the quality of work that we create and send out into the world that can point to God. Uh, Most people have an aesthetic sense. When they see things that are beautiful, they say, "This is beautiful." And a lot of people, this is a powerful argument for a lot of people for the existence of God. So if we're in arts and in entertainment, and we create something that's beautiful, that is remarkable, it can be used to point people to God. And when we are academicians in the academia, our scholarship, our articles, our teaching itself can be used as tools to point people to God. Now,
That's
if I'm
interesting.
doing it,
Mhm.
if I'm writing an argument over metaphysics, right? If I'm arguing for some metaphysical viewpoint, now to the lay Christian, that may not look like it's related to Christianity at all. It may not look like it's modeling how Christians should do scholarship at all, because they take a ethical viewpoint for everything. But God is not just a God of morality; He is a God of being itself, right? He is not just holy, but he is necessarily existent. He is the
Mhm. Mhm.
all-knowing one. And so it's about the reflecting to the world the image of God in ourselves. And that image is not just a moral one. It's an image that includes the intellect, that includes the reasoning. And so scholarship takes the form of the knowledge, and it can reflect God and promote God and encourage others to come to God through the proficiency of which we present our scholarship.
Man, I hope people was catching this, bro. Like, you just associated the argument from beauty with how with work ethic and how content is presented. Man, that's fascinating. I've never heard anybody explain it that way. But that's powerful. Speaking of work, let's talk a little bit about your work, right? Because I know we've had a few conversations about your work in terms of the argument from reason, which happens to be one of
Mhm.
my favorite arguments that I certainly believe points to the existence of God. Take us into that a little bit. What is the argument from reason, and just help us explore that topic a bit from your vantage point.
Yeah, so the argument from reason is it's a name. It's called the argument from reason, but I guess to be fair, there are several arguments from reason. And different thinkers give different versions. So I came at this argument from the work of Alvin Plantinga, who is an eminent philosopher of religion. He writes from the analytic tradition. He's very logic heavy in his thinking, in his arguments. He is well known for refuting the logical problem of evil. He's
Oh yeah,
well
that's
known
right.
for
Yeah.
for for giving a valid argument form for the ontological argument. He's well known for showing that religious belief does not need arguments in order to be rational. Uh, and so he's also well known for the EEAN, which is an abbreviation for the evolutionary argument against naturalism.
Right.
I said EEAN, the EAAN, evolutionary argument against naturalism.
I do the same thing.
But,
I add like an extra E on there, but yeah, I was with you though. I was walking with you.
I
Yeah,
added a couple of E's and a couple of A's, the alphabets. But yeah, so he's very well known for that argument. And it basically what it shows is it shows that the probability that our faculties by which we form beliefs are reliable given unguided evolution, or the fact that they not unguided evolution, the fact that they arose naturally is low, because for any belief it can either be true or false, right? And according to many evolutionary thinkers and proponents, uh evolution does not care about belief. It does not select for belief and for truth specifically. So if it doesn't select for truth, then what does it select for? Well, it's about survivability, your ability to pass on your genes to your descendants, etc. But that's consistent with all of our beliefs being false. He gives an example. Let's say someone sees a tiger and he says, I want to pet this tiger, but the best way to pet the tiger is to run the opposite direction. So he runs from tigers when they are close, and he lives on. However, he has a false belief. Now what that shows is that it is not true that survivability depends on the truth of your beliefs. That's all you need to show that. And once that is true, then you show that there's not a causal connection between the truth of our beliefs and our fit for survival. But what the consequence of this is that the naturalist, the atheist, has to have some doubt for not just the belief in naturalism and evolution, but for all the beliefs he or she has. Darwin is famous for mentioning this. Darwin himself said that when he considers his beliefs, and he was asking himself, what reason, what confidence does a monkey have in for believing the beliefs that are formed by the monkey's mind? And so, if he came from monkeys, I guess the logic is it's like, if the monkeys don't have confidence and they are distant cousins, on the common ancestry view, then not ancestry, common ancestor, then we also as well, we may not have a warrant for that thinking. So I thought that argument was so powerful. It deals with reason, but I kind of have a broad interest in all things based in thought, logic. I'm interested in the history of logic. I'm interested in the use of logic by early Christian thinkers, because it is fascinating to me that the universities came out of the monastic traditions, but these monists were Christians who had adopted Aristotle's categories. And Peter Abelard was actually one of the first people to use the word theology and coin the term. But what he did is he applied Aristotle's categories and Aristotle's organon to the scripture. And this is where they started deducing what would follow from that. But to me, there's a hand in glove fit between logic and Christian faith and the Christian tradition. Why did these thinkers what did they see in logic that fits so well with their view of Christianity, of Christ? Was it because in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God?
All right,
which is the word where we get logic from. How do we explain it? So that's one of my future research interests. So I'm kind of just trying to put together what I'm interested in, what logic is, the nature of the logical reality, its introduction into Christian faith, the worldview that undergirded the acceptance of Aristotle's logical treatises. And then the argument of reason is kind of a part of that investigation that is focused on logic as a whole. But
So
yeah.
let me see if I have this right, because I think I'm tracking with you here, because I feel like you're raising two distinct issues, or at least two. On the one hand, it might be an epistemological issue. In that, if naturalism is true, and the best story about how humans have come to be who we are is the story of evolution, then we have good grounds. We have good reasons to doubt our reason, our ability to reason. So we don't have access, or I should say, we should be skeptical that we have reliable access to logic. And then, but logic itself, I guess, kind of the other branch of I hear what you're saying, is logic itself. There's an ontological question. So yeah, the epistemological question is in terms of what access do we have to logic, and then we have the ontological question of what is logic and to what reality is it pointing to. In other words, it seems like not all worldviews can account for the existence of logic in the first place, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and to your point about those early, monks, and I can't pronounce the guy's name that you that you mentioned, but the gentleman that you talked about who married Aristotle's logic to the study of God and the scriptures.
Mhm.
It seems like he would have had to have had a worldview that could accommodate that. If he was
Mhm.
maybe of some other worldview, maybe it wouldn't have worked out so well. Am I capturing you? You're right. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, absolutely. That was
Mhm.
well put, and I think you put that even better than I did.
No, no, I'm just trying. I'm just tracking with you. I'm
Is
just
that
tracking
what
with
I was talking about? Wow, that's interesting.
you.
But
That's
yeah,
cool.
so I think you put that very well.
Excellent, excellent, man. I mean, it's so many different directions, and like you, I don't know if I have it in the shelf behind me, but Alvin Plantinga is, I think, is where the conflict really lies.
Mm.
He just lays
Mhm.
out that the EAAN extensively, and one thing I've been interested in is because I think that there's, in addition to the EAAN, I think you come away from that of having good reasons to doubt your reason, and then it seems to me that there's even an even deeper problem. When it gets down to this issue of like physical determinism, and how we can have access to knowledge in light of physical determinism. Because if the universe sprang into existence one way or the other from some sort of Big Bang like beginnings, and every event that's happening in the universe is just kind of like the falling of physical dominoes, physical things bumping into other physical things, going back to the Big Bang. Then it would be the case that even the physical events going on in our physical brains is what's determining what we think, as opposed to like what you're referring to is logic and so on and so forth. We don't have access to logic because the only thing going on in our minds is just the bumping about of physical stuff. And so I feel like that takes on its own, it kind of, again, chafes away at this confidence that we can have in our rational faculties if naturalism is true. What do you think about that angle as well? Like, have you explored that in your research, and kind of how that pans out?
Yes, it sounds very similar, if not more concise than author James Balfour's argument from reason. And this is, and so what I mentioned earlier is that because of my interest in Alvin Plantinga's EAAN argument, I kind of began to look historically at this argument and to see how it developed.
Oh yeah, take us
I'd
into that,
heard that,
man.
yeah, well, I'd heard that C.S. Lewis gave an argument from reason, and so I was like, "Oh, C.S. Lewis gave an argument from reason," and some people pointed to the Alvin Plantinga basically refurbishing C.S. Lewis's argument. And so I said, well, let me read what he had. But then once I read C.S. Lewis, I saw that he was influenced by Arthur James Balfour. So Arthur James Balfour was born July the 25th in 1848, and he died March 19th in 1930. He's also known as Lord Balfour, and he was a British statesman and a conservative politician. He was the prime minister of the United Kingdom from 1902 to 1905. So he's really well known.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
He was the foreign secretary in Lord George ministry. He issued the Balfour Declaration of 1917 on behalf of this cabinet, and what that did is that supported forming a home for the Jewish people in Palestine. So with
Wow.
all that's going on right now, it's funny
Wow.
that we would be discussing James Balfour because a lot of I've seen a lot of critiques of England as the cause of the occupation in Israel, et cetera, et
Right,
cetera, et
right.
cetera.
Wow.
I'm not making any claims about that. I'm just saying this is what I've heard others say.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But so he in addition to being a public statesman and politician, he was a philosopher. So he did
Wow.
this when he went home.
Had no idea. I didn't know that. Okay. Got you.
Yeah, he's a pretty important figure in like just history generally, but in philosophy as well with this argument. So as far as I can see, his argument can be summarized into 4 points. There are inevitable beliefs, which is very interesting because he talks about inevitable beliefs, which I think during his time he wrote Humanism and Theism in 1915. That's when he published it. He gave the Guilford lectures. I think he published these as a form of the Guilford lectures, which Alvin Plantinga also gave the Guilford lectures, and I think a lot of different famous thinkers in the tradition gave the Guilford lectures. And so I'm sure it's the Guilford lectures that he gave. So he basically took those lectures and poured them into this book, and he published it in 1915. And so inevitable beliefs are similar to, in my mind, to basic beliefs. He says,
Okay.
but
Okay.
he describes. I've never heard of this idea of inevitable beliefs, but it's interesting to me, and I can kind of geek out on it. But they are beliefs that a person may not have at one point, but will have at some point.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I was like, and he calls them inevitable beliefs. Inevitable. So some examples are the existence of the external world.
That's what I was wondering if he's going to go there. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And then the regularity of nature. Right. And so, which is interesting because I think, have I ever thought nature was regular? I don't know if I had to believe, but I think all of my other beliefs kind of assumed it. So I guess I did
Yeah, it's
kind
like
of
a
believe it. But
presupposed. Yeah.
right. It may be right. So I don't know. I guess it depends on what we want to say about, do you have a belief if you've never considered it before?
Man, that's a good question. Yeah, I guess you could have maybe an implied belief. Uh, I feel like the word presuppose probably fits better, but yeah,
Right.
that's I like to chew on that. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but this is kind of like what I do in my class. Like when we're chewing on some some ideas, we
Oh,
kind of
that's
just
good though. That's good. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just pose a question to the class, and we try to see if we can solve it. I mean, usually I ask the questions that I don't know myself. So, like
See
I'm
what they come up
trying
with,
to
right?
figure this out. Right.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
like, guys, if y'all could if
Help a brother out.
anyone knows, you tell me, because I'm trying to figure this out.
Right.
But but those are the two fundamental beliefs. Then the next premise is that these beliefs are natural products, the determination of a long chain of causes, some of which claim to be reasons for beliefs in question. Okay, so I have a belief in the external world. That belief is the end result of a chain of causes. Of those causes are all natural. Some of these causes are called reasons for beliefs. So why did I eat the cake? Well, I had a reason to eat it because I had this belief, this reason that I was hungry. The reason I did it was I was hungry, so I ate the cake. So eating the cake is caused by the reason, right? But if you're eating the cake is caused by the reason and not by your choice, then you see where he's going with this. Then it's not the product of free will, right? You did it, so it's like, so I wanted to. I had to do it because I wanted to. So it's no room for freedom in there. The cause is sufficient to produce the effect. So if you're hungry, then you're gonna eat the cake, right? And so you think about that idea, and it has implications for law and how we hold people responsible, right? If there's no free will, which is a separate topic. So the third premise is predictions depend on the regularity of rationality, of regularity of nature for rationality, right? How can I make a prediction unless I assume that nature is regular? Right? It's the problem of induction that Hume pointed out.
That's right.
How do I know the sun is going to come out? Well, if it came out yesterday, then it'll come out today. Okay, well, how do you defend that premise? Well, in the past, it had always came out. The past had always been like, well, you're not. Well, that's assuming the same thing you're supposed to demonstrate.
That's right.
So you cannot prove this. And also, Arthur Balfour, he is critiquing empiricism, what some people call pure empiricism. But I just think it's empiricism generally. The view that knowledge must be formed on the basis of the some inference or implication, and but lead ultimately back to the senses. And so you can't observe the future,
right?
And you cannot observe the past. So your warrant for belief that the future would be like the past cannot be in the past because you can't observe it. It's not scientifically testable,
right?
And so then his fourth premise is universal causation. All things have causes, and the same causes produce the same effects. And this is event uniformitarianism. And so if you hold to all of those claims, he concludes, my best desire has been to show that all we think best in human culture, whether associated with beauty, goodness, or knowledge, requires God for its support. That humanism without theism loses more than half its value.
Wow. Got you. Interesting.
He's kind of all over the place with this argument, by the way. Like, he looks at art, he looks at probability theory, he looks at physics, and so he tries to show in a variety of different areas that are significant to human beings. If we don't have theism, we lose the significance that we place in those things, and even in science itself.
So if I understand correctly, he's basically saying that with those 4 points that you made, if you have if your worldview commits you to those 4 points, then the cost of that would be all these other things that we understand to be valuable. In other words,
right.
Like theism, the existence of God breathes life into reality in such a way that, and maybe that's why I need some help. What would he say that theism brings to the table that gets you beyond just the commitment of those 4 points? I'm saying, like, what is the missing element for him?
Right. Well, the reality of those things. I think he thinks that on a cause and effect viewpoint, on determinism, that things like love, beauty, they are not objective. Right? You just think this is just a belief that you have, but that belief is not a reflection of reality. It's more of a reflection. It's more the effect of a prior cause. Right? If it's just like thumping you on the forehead and making you think that there's an ice cream truck outside.
That's
It's like,
good. That's good.
oop,
That's
oop,
good.
it's like, there's an ice cream truck outside. It's like the belief is going to lose all value because once you go outside, no one will be there unless someone was there. But then, that would be a coincidence. But there's no connection between reality and belief. So in this way, he's pointing towards this argument from reason.
Yeah. See, now I got you, because I was trying to get there in my head, and this I've just never heard. Because like I told you, I've got some of Balfour's work right here, but I think he puts it a little bit differently in this work than yours. I've never heard that case right there, and so now it's got me chewing on it a bit more. That's fascinating, because now, so here's the thing, like, for my audience, one of the ways that you can test a worldview is to do an analysis of it and weigh out whether or not that worldview can account for the human, just parts of the human experience that are evident, if you will. You know what I'm saying? In other words, if you have a worldview that in order to live it out, you have to live as if it's false, that's a red flag that there's something wrong with your worldview, right? So to Balfour's point, if you have these 4 commitments, in your worldview, some sort of humanism, naturalism, whatever, and you have to, in adopting those realities, you have to deny the reality of things like beauty, love, agency of some sort, freedom of the will, we might call it, or whatever. Then you've made a wrong turn somewhere. That's evidence that there's something wrong with your naturalistic worldview. And this is fascinating. This is like mind blowing to me, because this is my first time hearing arguments, this Balfour argument laid out this way, and it sounds powerful. I mean, have you utilized it at all? Like, have you put it to work, and then what kind of responses?
Well, I have not. I have some critiques of Balfour's approach. Balfour, what I kind of just gave, I kind of just fixed his his argument up.
Is the refurbished version. Okay.
Right. But once you read his work, he mentions himself. He says that someone may be put off by the sheer amount of different topics that I've covered to get to my conclusion. And he writes this in his own book. And his argument is hazy.
Okay.
It was like he was groping in the dark. Like Paul said, looking through a
glass,
dim glass, not knowing what he sees, but he was hitting on something. This is why historically he was pointing to, but did he do it with maximum clarity? I don't think he did. But is this argument salvageable in a deductive form? Like, in terms of argument for the best explanation, I think giving the truth of the things that we experience, I think his argument is very powerful. And he mentions this. He says, my argument won't work for the person who thinks that beauty and aesthetics is elusive in ethics. He said it won't work for them. But he says there are a lot of people. So the point I made earlier about aesthetics and how some people see it as pointing to God, he actually makes that same point in here.
Got you. Okay.
And he says, but there are many people who think that beauty is real, that things are really beautiful, and that this is something that needs to be explained. And for those people, once you point out that without God, you won't have beauty, because some further premises, he says that this will give them reason to challenge some of their atheistic worldviews. So some further premises he says, if we would maintain the value of our highest beliefs and emotions, then we must find a congruous origin. meaning
Okay.
that, and so this seems to mean that the origin of our highest beliefs and feelings cannot undercut or show those feelings to be illusory. He adds that the source of morality must be moral. Knowledge must be the source of knowledge must be rational. So he has an idea of, if morality is going to keep its significance, its source must also be moral. It must
That's
have a
right.
moral
Yeah.
basis.
That's
If
right.
it
Yeah.
has an irrational basis, such as, like I click this, then this happened, cause and effect. Oh, I should love my neighbor. Oh, I should stop loving my neighbor. Oh, I should love my neighbor. He says then the belief itself loses its significance
Right. If the
because it's not
source.
based right, because the source. And so then he has another premise. If so, then the source of morality and knowledge cannot be mechanism, atoms bouncing against one another. It cannot be naturalism, or it cannot be agnosticism. And then he says science tells us that premises and conclusions and inferences are natural products, but that undercuts rationality because the source now is not rational, but the
Right.
premise is a rational component. And then he says premises, conclusions, and inferences are a part of a set of causes and effects which increase in number with the passing of time.
Makes sense. Okay.
And so that's kind of my latest reconstruction of him.
Okay.
And maybe my first, he was just kind of mentioning things, so I kind of pulled these threads together, and he wants to end with, if you reject theism, then you lose everything valuable within humanism.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
the
Okay.
humanist that he's trying to argue to, the person who says,
I get it.
I believe in right, but I don't think you need God to be right. I believe in beauty, but I don't think you need God.
Right, right. No, and see this, and I'll tell you what's powerful about that is I think sometimes when it comes to apologetics or just, well, I'll just say in regard to apologetics, if you get caught up in like debunking a claim or just answering a question, you can miss out on making a compelling argument by not taking into account the person with whom you're
Absolutely.
having the interaction. And so what Balfour is doing is saying, okay, well, you guys hold these things right here to be super valuable. And I'm going to show you why on your worldview, you can't hold these things that you specifically hold to be valuable. And that's going to be more pointed and more compelling for somebody who who indeed holds that position. But sometimes I feel like we're just kind of swinging in the dark. We just got arguments and we just start swinging with them, as opposed to listening, understanding the person with whom we're engaging, and then making more of a direct, I don't want to use the word attack, but a direct engagement of their view. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's I think you're absolutely right. And 2 points come to mind. First, I think what you said shows that not every problem is a nail, and not every solution is needs a hammer. That you fit the tool to the context. And then secondly, I think what you're saying is very valuable and important to your audience and your listeners and people who watch this interview, because it gives you almost a way to determine what area of apologetics you want to work in.
There
You
you go.
start with your audience.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Start with
So
your
yeah.
audience. Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's
what
powerful.
you just said is the how. So if someone else, well, how do I know which area do I want to focus on? Listen to the advice you just gave. You start with your audience. Who are you trying to convince? We need some apologists who study Hinduism and
Yeah,
Islam
that's right.
and Mormonism and you know.
That's right. That's right.
Start with your audience and your background and your exposure and those people you are connected with and connected to.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fantastic, man. And I think that when we do that, we can bring forth the full value of what the Christian worldview has to offer, from a diversity of voices to a diversity of souls that need to be reached. Man, I just want to say thank you, man, for stopping through. You will most definitely be back on the channel, because I got so much other stuff that I would love to engage with you on. But as we get out of here, man, how can people access your work? I know you got your channel as well. Let people know, where they can access you, and then we'll roll with it like that, bro.
Well, thanks again for the opportunity. It was such a pleasure being on with you, and doing our mental workouts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if anyone wants to support us, you can follow the Thought Decoder with Sean Mixon on YouTube. The Thought Decoder with Sean Mixon. I have a variety of interviews available, and I try to bring this perspective, of this logical analysis within the Christian context on my channel and with my interviewees. And again, thank you so much. And this is really, been a blast. You got me riled up there. I'm gonna have to go calm down and scream outside in my backyard and disturb some of my neighbors.
Oh man, well, hey, this is a great way to to start your day. You know what I'm saying? To dig into this. And the reality is, I feel kind of selfish because I don't often have a lot of folks I can just sit down and chop this stuff up with. So I know I held you past the time when I told you I would, but once again, man, thank you for coming on the channel. Sean Mayhem Mixon, man. I'm
all right.
The first to coin that phrase. You bringing the ruckus out here, Doc, and I appreciate it, man. Keep on doing what you're doing, brother. Being a light for Christ, man, and you represent this well out here, brother. So y'all know what it is out there, man. Love God, love people, take care of the things that God blesses you with. If you feel so inclined, hit me up on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Patreon as well, man. Patreon.com/Adam Coleman. We love y'all, man. Peace.